Hello, happy Easter. Welcome to this episode of Business Incorporated. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Well, we don't have market figures coming from Africa today because markets in Africa are closed for the holiday. So we head straight to the Middle East, where just two major markets are trading today. Friday, checking in with them, we see that equities were already closed on Thursday. Well, Abu Dhabi Exchange traded 0.29% lower, while Dubai's index rose by a similar margin at intraday. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the Qatari exchanges closed trading for the week on a mixed note. We'll go to Europe now, where the euro has plunged to a two-year low against the dollar after the European Central Bank declined to change its stimulus plans. Rising inflation in the currency zone and action from other central banks have led to growing calls for the ECB to act faster. Well, we have Stephen now joining us to give us updates from Berlin. Hello, Stephen. Happy Easter. And why does it look like the ECB is pushing off the end to this stimulus?
That's right. The ECB deciding yesterday not to speed up the end of its buyback program for European bonds, also keeping its benchmark rates at zero. That is a huge difference from what we're seeing in the U.S. and the U.K., which are both rushing to really taper off those stimulus programs, both of them looking at the prices rising in recent months, consumer goods, gas, things like that. That is also happening here on the continent, and yet the ECB is really dragging its feet, and that is facing much more criticism across the continent. But we have to remember that there is a very a typical conservatism that the ECB often acts with. It's representing 19 different nations across this Eurozone that all use the euro currency. They have different political goals, they have different debt loads, and they have different growth rates, in fact. And when we look at the language, this is interesting. We also see how conservative the ECB is, saying it, for example, it should end its bond buying program in the third quarter, that an interest rate hike would follow sometime after that program ends, and that increases of rates would be gradual. So all of that sort of hedging language to really sort of leave the door open for other possibilities. If you compare that to what we're hearing out of the Fed, for example, in the U.S., where it's saying inflation has to be battled now, we have to push it back right at this moment. Now, the ECB, the biggest problem they're facing is that they acknowledge inflation is high and unacceptably high across the EU. The problem is that growth rates are not satisfactorily high. That is, growth rates are not high enough so that were there to be an interest rate hike across the EU, then that could be problematic for some countries with low growth rates. That could even push some potentially into recession, and that would be an even bigger problem for their financials. And so when you're talking about countries like Italy that already have borrowing problems because they have such a high debt load and such generally low growth rates, then that could be an even bigger problem for them. So that really is the needle that the ECB is trying to thread.
Yeah, a lot of needles there they have to thread. And then we've seen the Russian President Vladimir Putin threatening once again to stop gas supplies to Europe. We've heard this before. How realistic is this threat?
Right, Putin making these comments in an address yesterday, there's really no way of knowing is the short answer of that. We know that Putin makes addresses pretty regularly in which he tends to sort of make some of these threats. He said before that he would consider cutting off supplies, that it was a possibility. This time he said that he considers European nations in default if they're not paying in euros and have set up a rubles account with a Russian bank so that there is an immediate exchange from euros to rubles. This is something he demanded more than a week ago. European nations responded by largely saying, no, this is not something we're going to do. So he seems to be carrying this argument one step further, threatening again to cut off supplies. And he also said that he could redirect those supplies, that there are other nations that would take those gas supplies. And I think there's a bit of skepticism here about that, because Europe has been Russia's largest customer for quite some time. It's built the infrastructure around serving Europe with billions of cubic meters of gas daily. We're talking about pipelines, multiple pipelines that run into the continent. So this is not something that he can replicate immediately. Sure, he might be able to send liquefied natural gas to other places, but that's time consuming. You can't send the same quantities. And right now he doesn't have anywhere near the same kind of contracts that he has with Europe. So there is going to be some skepticism that turning off the gas to Europe wouldn't also hurt him as much. And that's why I think right now we're not seeing a response to these comments that he's made.
All right, and then markets are closed for the holiday, but any outlook for next week?
Yeah, a couple of definite things that we can expect. Everyone's going to be looking forward to quarterly results from Netflix and Tesla. But other than that, I think we're going to see some of the same issues that we've been seeing this week. We're going to hope for resolution or at least a further development of some of them. And that would include this issue of Twitter and whether Elon Musk will be able to buy the whole company as he intends. There's going to be some questions over what's going to happen in China in terms of the lockdowns in Shanghai. That's going to have ramifications potentially for the global economy if Shanghai continues to remain in this indefinite lockdown with no clear picture of coming out. That's going to affect global trade around the world. The war, of course, the development of the war, if Russia begins its offensive soon, that's going to be an issue. And then I think we're going to continue to see inflation concerns bite into stock performance and the way that investors are reacting on the markets. This is going to be a continued issue for them, and I think we'll see that in the next week as well.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Let's move now to the U.S. Well, of course, the market is not open today, but the S&P 500 and NASDAQ Composite fell yesterday, capping a losing week as investors digested mixed earnings results from major banks and rising inflation. The broad market index fell by 1.21% to 4,392.59, while the NASDAQ Composite lost 2.14% to 13,351.08. Meanwhile, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 113.36 points to 34,451.23. The S&P 500 is down 2.13% for the four-day holiday week. Let's go to Asia now. Shares in Asia Pacific today mostly slipped today, and China did not lower interest rates despite analyst expectations for more stimulus. Investor focus turned to mainland Chinese stocks, with many major markets in the region closed for Good Friday. Mainland stocks have been under pressure for much of the past week as China contends with the worst COVID outbreak since the start of the pandemic, and Shanghai is still under lockdown. Well, today, China's stocks struggled for direction, but finally settled in negative territory by the close of trading. The Shanghai Composite was down 0.45% to close at 3,211.24, and Shenzhen Components declined 0.5% to 11,648.57. Although investors were hoping for more policy support ahead, China on Friday held back on lowering rates. The People's Bank of China left medium-term rates unchanged despite expectations for more stimulus. Now let's leave the markets and see how Easter is starting off in Nigeria. Well, it's a holiday and Christians around the world are celebrating the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. However, celebrations appear to be on a low key as the state of economy takes its toll on purchasing power of many Nigerians. We have a correspondent who went out there to take a survey, Will Ibong, and she sent in this report.
After several months of elevated food inflation, this is what the Ido and Ijora fish markets in Lagos State look like on Easter Eve as Nigerians prepare for the celebration. Markets seem deserted, though with pockets of transactions. Traders attribute the seemingly lack of patronage to the harsh economic environment.
Today is Thursday before Good Friday for Easter celebration, but now we open, we do not see anybody. Normally, a day like this, customers that will be around waiting for us to open so that they will buy.
The sales are so down totally. Before, when we were still talking about there's no market, we at least in a day we make sometimes 500, 600. But by now, hardly we get up to 100,000 a day.
Residents who took time out to shop for Easter expressed dissatisfaction at the continued hike in prices of food.
I come to buy rice, I never buy. Because my money no reach. The rice before now 5,000, 7,000, but now we not fit buy rice. But the rice for chop now 30,000, 29,000, 35,000. Why?
A kilo of turkey costs 4,000 naira. This is not right. Things are too expensive. We cannot eat.
The prices of essential food commodities such as chicken, fish, and turkey have jumped by more than 100% within the past 2 years. For example, a kilogram of croaker fish, which cost 1,200 naira in 2020, now goes for between 2,000 and 2,500 naira. Titus fish, which cost about 1,000 naira per kilo, now sells for 2,000 naira, while a kilogram of hake fish, commonly known as panla, is now sold for 1,600 naira. The chairman of the Ijora Fish Market, Mr. Aino Adekoya, attributes the increase in the cost of fish to rising energy prices.
In the past 40-45 days, we've been facing the hike in diesel. Most of these fishing companies, they go to the high sea with diesel. On a daily basis, you have a vessel that is consuming 2,500 liters of diesel per day. And when they have to come back, those costs will go on the product they are landing with, which is the fish.
The story is no different in other parts of the country. For instance, at the relief markets located in Owerri, Imo State, sellers and buyers lament the economic slowdown.
Chicken we are selling like 2,000 naira one side, before now is about 3,000, 3,500.
It's really affecting the masses, and we are really feeling the pain. Every day you come to the market, the last price you bought is not the same.
Another example is Chidi Amoche, who has been trading in the relief market in Owerri for more than 10 years. He is one of the traders deeply affected by the price shock and believes the government can help change the situation.
Things very expensive now. Even the rice we used to get about 20-something thousand now, it's up to 35,000 now, going to 40,000. So many customers, they have been complaining. If they come, they can't buy the goods. They say, that is not my budget. So we are stranded in this market. There's no customer anymore because of things is very expensive. And what the federal government to do is, at least the old price we are in before is more better than now. So at least they can reduce the price of the goods so they can be able for customers to buy.
Tales of economic hardship also trail Easter shopping at the Utako market in Abuja, the nation's capital city.
Actually, they are not buying very well like before because the economy now is very, very high. Not like before. Like normal, if the way things was like normal before, by this time we have left this market. But I'm still here tracking with one head of ugu since morning.
If you buy something for like, let's say, 5,000, maybe a cup, now it will be like half cup. So things are really bad, like the prices of things have really skyrocketed.
For Abuja residents, the high cost of living has been far-reaching and has encroached on other social amenities like cost of transportation and electricity.
So it's not their fault, and we seller it's not our own fault too. Where we bought from is cost, then we need to sell it in a high price.
Okay, inflation prices has gone up, the cost of living has generally gone up. Basic amenities from electricity to water to with the first scarcity that we had before, no jobs, basically everything. I don't know.
With the continuous rise in the prices of food amid high inflation and geopolitical tensions, it may indeed have to be a somber Easter celebration. Will Ibang, Channels Television News.
Well, that's it happening in Nigeria, and I believe it's a picture of most of what is happening around the world when we talk about the price and inflation and all that. Well, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll tell you other stories happening today in Business Incorporated. To join us after the break. You're welcome back. You're still watching Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Let's move to Egypt now, where Egypt has approved India as its major wheat supplier. The Minister of Union, Commerce and Industry announced that Indian farmers are feeding the world. Well, Egyptian delegations of the General Authority for Supply Commodities, Agriculture and Supply Ministry were on a visit to India and examined Indian grains, which involve touring fields and grain warehouses as well as export warehouses in different Indian provinces. And this came after the war that broke out in Ukraine by Russia, as both countries used to be Egypt's major wheat suppliers. And Egypt is the world's top wheat importer, usually buys the grain via tenders set by its state grains buyer as the general authority for supply commodities. And in Kenya, manufacturers are struggling to obtain US dollars to meet up with their obligations. The challenges they face in accessing the currencies, putting a strain on supply relations and the ability to negotiate favorable prices in sports markets. Members of the Manufacturing Association are calling for the opening up and encouraging of interbank trading to increase liquidity in the market. Kenya's foreign reserves stood at $8.28 billion on the 14th of April, and that's enough to cover for almost 5 months' worth of imports. From Kenya, we'll go to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has called it a catastrophe of enormous proportions. Talking about the flood, at least 300 people have died after the roads and hillsides were washed away and homes collapsed. The search for missing persons is still ongoing, and the death toll is expected to rise. Well, it's been described as the worst rainfall in 6 decades. We have Brian Pugani, our correspondent in Johannesburg, to join us and give us updates on that. Hello, Brian. Good afternoon. So Brian, well...
Good afternoon, Ini. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, we have to say so sorry about the loss of lives, especially, and then the property. What's the update on the situation of the flood at this time?
Well, what we've had reports saying that over 300 people have lost their lives. Many more are still missing. Search and rescue is on the ground looking for people. It's quite a sad situation. I'm actually in Durban right now. I just arrived. I'm just driving here. You can see a bit of damage on the road. The beaches have been closed. Small businesses will be affected because it's a long Easter weekend. So if the beaches are closed, which means these small businesses who sell stuff to tourists and people coming from different provinces won't be able to sell those kind of stuff, like your artware and traditional stuff, which they normally sell. We also saw the harbor being damaged as well. We saw the containers just scattered everywhere. That means a lot of business and supply will be affected in the next coming weeks until such stuff is resolved and sorted out. But what the president did say is that they've declared Durban and KZN as a state of disaster, which means it's a hands-on situation. But a lot of businesses will be affected. We don't know how that is going to affect the country as well, because Durban is one of the main harbors which connects the rest of the country. So we're going to see in the next coming weeks what kind of impact and what amount has been lost by these floods.
Yeah, very huge there. Well, we hear that the president has been visiting survivors. Any talk on compensation of households, of businesses, anything along that line yet?
Well, the president did do a tour of the area on Wednesday. He visited a lot of these areas which are really affected, especially the families who lost people, who lost loved ones in the floods. What he did say and promise is that the government is going to take care of the basic needs which are needed by people now, which is shelter, your food, any type of aid which they need. There is no talk of compensation because there is no real tangible damage which people can really account for. But what government is saying is that they can only help people with what they can at the moment. No talk of compensation to rebuild their houses or to any lost furniture. But what they're saying, they can shelter people at the moment and then give them any food aid and any type of aid, even for the school children whose schools have been affected. Government is saying they will really step up and help where they can in those areas at the moment.
Wow, this is not a very good Easter for the survivors there. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for bringing us up to date. We'll certainly follow up on this story and see how this, or what efforts the government will put together for them. Thank you so much, Brian. Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Thank you. Same to you.
So moving on now, Samuel Rigo is not open to share the secret portion he adds to his fertilizer, revealing only that the brown liquid is called Safi Proprietary Enhancement Formula, or he's less shy about the result. At his processing plant in Kenya, Rigo turns agricultural waste into an organic fertilizer that retails at least less than half the price of its inorganic alternative. Well, at a time when we're talking of food security and how to boost production, this is a story we should follow.
Globally, there is renewed interest in organic fertilizer as global prices for chemical inputs skyrocket because of the war in Ukraine. Demand has spiked since the onset of the Ukraine crisis, prompting him to double the size of his team, who are working 18-hour days and producing 35 to 45 tons of fertilizer per week, double the output before the conflict started. For now, Rigo's target market is smallholder farmers who have been using synthetic fertilizer for years, but seeing their yields decline over time as their land becomes increasingly degraded.
We target smallholder farmers. These are farmers who, over the long time, they have seen their yields decrease, despite the fact that they are using synthetic fertilizer year in, year out. And what has happened actually is that their soils have been slightly turning to acidic. So, and when these soils become acidic, they become infertile. So we are here to rejuvenate that or reverse that.
It takes several stages to repurpose the rice hulks into Rigo's organic fertilizer. First, his team sets fire to mounds of rice hulks, letting them smolder for around 8 hours, employing a similar low-oxygen burn as used in charcoal production. When the carbonized hulks, known as biochar, have cooled, the team adds the mystery enhancement formula, mixing and turning the black substance until the right level of moisture is achieved. Biochar, such as Rigo's, not only adds nutrients to the soil, but has many other benefits, such as helping it retain moisture, combat erosion, encourage microorganisms, and restore acidity levels.
Waste is readily available across different farming communities and farming villages, not only in Kenya, but globally. So, and our work is to convert this waste into a high-yielding fertilizer. So what this means is that we have the potential to have this anywhere in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, as well as globally.
For Rigo, that translates into happy customers like local tomato farmer David Irungo.
My harvests were not as good as they are now, thanks to Safi Organics. This organic fertilizer is very good, and in my opinion, it has up to 3 benefits. First, it is organic and reaches the soil, but also plays a role in reducing acidity. From what I see, my crops are growing well, and during harvest, my fruits are even bigger than before.
Ninaona mmea inaenda sawa, harvesting, wakati wa kuharvest hiyo tunda inakuwa nono.
Rigo decided to enter the fertilizer business in 2013 when he saw mountains of rice hulks being burnt, polluting the environment and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions.
When we came to Mwea in 2013, I told you I found mountains of rice husks. And these mountains were actually burnt. So everywhere we would be having like smoke going to the environment. So what would have happened that this waste was contributing to increasing greenhouse gases to the environment, making the place or where we are living today worse off in terms of the environment. Today we are converting that and putting it into the soil.
So at this time when there's a lot of threats to food security, I guess Africans and other members of other parts of the world should also look for ways to boost production, and that's what Samuel is doing there. Well, that's it on the program for today and this week. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Have a great holiday and weekend. I'm Ini John Mekwa.